The marble floor of the penthouse reflects nothing but darkness. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlook Chicago's skyline, but tonight the city lights feel very far away. Very small. Very useless. Noah Valenti lies motionless on the white marble. 7 years old. Lips the color of slate. His small chest rises and falls in irregular gasps, like a fish drowning in air. Dante Valenti kneels beside him. The man who controls Chicago's underworld, whose signature on a piece of paper has ended lives, whose name whispers through criminal networks like a curse, is on his knees, hands trembling over his nephew's body. His tailored charcoal suit, worth more than most people's yearly salary, is creased with his own sweat. His dark eyes, usually hard as obsidian, are wide with terror. Marco and Pietro stand frozen against the far wall, their shoulders pressed against the glass like they are trying to disappear into it. Neither man has ever seen their boss afraid. Fear does not belong on Dante Valenti's face. It belongs to other people. Weaker people. The private doctor, summoned from his sleep 20 minutes ago, stammers into his phone. The ambulance is 12 minutes out. 12 minutes. His fever spiked to 104.8 degrees. I cannot stabilize him without. Dante's hand shoots up. Shut up. Just shut up. The apartment holds its breath. The only sound is the shallow, struggling breathing of a dying child. 1 12-minute ambulance ride away from death. Then the elevator doors slide open. A woman pushes through, her diner uniform soaked dark with sweat and August humidity. Her orthopedic shoes, the kind worn thin from back-to-back shifts, from standing until the bones in her feet scream, hit the marble floor with a soft, urgent sound. She does not belong here. Everything about her says she does not belong here. Her name is Cassandra Rivera. She is 28 years old but looks decades older. Her left eye is swollen shut, the skin around it a landscape of purple and yellow bruises that radiate outward like a terrible sunrise. Around her throat, finger marks dark as bran circle her neck like a necklace of violence. Those marks are 1 day old. They came from the hands of her manager, Douglas Hale, when she refused to work overtime without pay. But none of that matters right now. She takes one look at Noah's blue lips. One look at Dante's trembling hands. One look at the doctor's useless panic. And something inside her shifts into absolute clarity. Move, she says. Her voice is quiet but it cuts through the room like a blade through silk. Everyone move. Now. She kneels beside Noah's body. Her hands, calloused, scarred, swollen from a dozen shifts of carrying plates and scrubbing tables, move with a precision that seems impossible for someone so broken. She tilts his head back carefully. She locks her fingers together over his small chest. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, she pumps. The rhythm is perfect. 30 compressions. 30 beats like a prayer that refuses to die. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. She breathes into his mouth. Gentle. Certain. 2 breaths. Then her hands return to his chest. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Marco and Pietro watch in absolute silence. They have watched Dante Valenti order executions. They have watched him smile while men begged for their lives. But they have never seen him watch another human being with such absolute helplessness. With such absolute love. The compressions continue. 1 minute passes. 2 minutes. The doctor stands uselessly, holding his phone. The sirens are still 11 minutes away. 10. 9. And then Noah gasps. It is a small sound. Almost nothing. But it is the sound of air reaching lungs that should be still. His body convulses. His eyes flutter. He coughs, a wet, terrible cough that sounds like drowning and survival happening at the same moment. He breathes. Cassandra does not stop the compressions. She does not move. She keeps her hands on his chest, feeling the heartbeat that is learning, again, how to live. The sirens are 5 minutes away. Dante Valenti rises slowly to his feet, his eyes never leaving the broken waitress who just pulled his nephew back from death. His hands are still trembling. Tears stream down his face, not the tears of a man, but the tears of someone who has just watched the impossible become real. Who has just watched someone worthless in the eyes of the world perform an act of absolute grace. He watches her. He watches the bruises on her throat. He watches the swollen eye. He watches the trembling in her shoulders that comes not from fear, but from the effort of those 30 compressions, over and over, refusing to stop, refusing to let a child die. And in that moment, something cold and dangerous stirs in his chest. A decision crystallizes like ice forming on winter water. The man who controls Chicago's underworld, whose word is law, whose signature ends lives, makes a silent promise to the universe itself. She will never be hurt again. Not by Douglas Hale. Not by anyone. Not ever. And the bruises on her throat belong to a dead man now. He simply doesn't know it yet. The ambulance arrives. The paramedics rush past Cassandra with oxygen masks and equipment and urgent, professional voices. They take over. They stabilize. They move Noah carefully onto a stretcher. They do not know that this child would be dead right now if not for a woman in a stained diner uniform. Dante watches them load his nephew into the ambulance. He watches the doors close. He watches the sirens wail into the Chicago night. But his eyes keep finding her. The woman in the orthopedic shoes. The woman with the swollen eye. The woman who, minutes ago, was saving his family with nothing but her own 2 hands and the absolute refusal to let death take what mattered. Marco appears at his elbow. His voice is very quiet. "Boss?" Dante does not respond. He is still watching Cassandra, who is now sitting on the white marble floor, her legs folded underneath her, her swollen eye closed, her shoulders shaking with the aftershock of adrenaline and effort. "I have worked for you for 15 years, Marco says." His voice carries something unprecedented. Something like wonder. "And I have never seen you look at anyone like that." Dante Valenti says nothing. But his jaw tightens. His hands, no longer trembling, curl into fists. "Get her a car," he says finally. His voice is deep and solid like an oath. Like a vow being made. Take her wherever she needs to go. And Marco? Anything she asks for. Money. Protection. A place to stay. Whatever it is, you bring it to her before she finishes asking. "Yes, sir," Marco says. But his eyes are wide. Because he understands what he just heard. Not an order. A declaration. A line being drawn in the sand. "And find out who did that to her throat," Dante continues. His voice drops lower. Darker. Like a curse being spoken into existence. Find out everything about her life. Every person who hurt her. Every person who took from her. Every person who looked at her and saw someone they could break. Boss. And then, Dante Valenti says, "We are going to have a very serious conversation about consequences." The air in the penthouse grows cold. Not from the air conditioning. From the simple fact that the most powerful man in Chicago has just decided that someone matters more than his own empire. That someone is breakable. And that anyone who broke her is now going to learn what happens when you damage something that belongs to a man like Dante Valenti. But what Cassandra does not know, not yet, is that she has just placed herself at the center of a war that will reshape Chicago's underworld. That the man watching her with tears still wet on his face has just decided she will never leave his protection again. That the bruises on her throat are about to become the most expensive decision Douglas Hale ever made. All of this is coming. All of it is inevitable now. But first, we need to go back. Back to the beginning. Back to 3 in the morning, to the Checkered Cup diner, where Cassandra's nightmare started. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning. The Checkered Cup diner smells like burnt coffee and grease that has been baked into the walls for 40 years. The black and white checkered floor reflects the flickering neon lights that hum like dying insects. It is 3 in the morning on a Thursday. The city outside the windows is empty and dark, the kind of dark that comes right before dawn, when even desperation is too tired to fight anymore. Cassandra Rivera stands at the register, counting bills with trembling fingers. $42.38. That is the sum total of human kindness from 8 hours of refilling coffee cups and wiping tables and smiling at people who did not see her face when they looked at her. They saw a uniform. They saw a function. They did not see a woman who had not eaten a full meal in 5 days. A woman who was rationing food to make $42 stretch into next week, into a life that somehow keeps continuing even when it should have stopped a long time ago. Douglas Hale emerges from the kitchen. He is 46 years old, with the soft belly of a man who eats the profits and the hard eyes of a man who eats souls. His manager's shirt is stretched tight across his chest. His gold wedding ring catches the neon as he counts the register drawer. $42, he says, looking at Cassandra with an expression that contained something between disgust and calculation. 42. On a Thursday night. You are losing your touch, Rivera. The diner was slow, Cassandra says. Her voice is barely above a whisper. Trembling. Like a candle in the wind. I cannot control who comes in or what they order. You can smile prettier, Douglas says. He steps closer. The smell of his cologne, cheap and aggressive, fills the space between them. You can bend further. You can make them feel less lonely in their empty lives. Cassandra's swollen eye throbs. The bruises on her throat pulse with a dull ache that reminds her of everything she refused yesterday. Douglas had demanded she work overtime. Without pay. Just like he always did. Just like he always would, as long as she was desperate enough to say yes. She had said no. And his hand had found her throat, and he had lifted her against the walk-in freezer, and he had whispered things into her face that felt like violence translated into words. You stay late tomorrow, Douglas says now. His voice is soft. Dangerous. Like a knife being sharpened. Overtime. Full shift. And you smile the whole time, understand? You smile or I will find someone cheaper. Someone hungrier. Someone less broken than you. Cassandra nods. She has learned not to argue. She has learned that some men, when they hold your survival in their hands, do not let go easily. The last customer sits in the corner booth. He wears a suit that costs more than her monthly rent. His hands are large and scarred. 2 men in identical black suits flank the door behind him, their eyes alert, their shoulders broad beneath tailored jackets. They do not look like they are waiting for coffee. Cassandra refills his cup anyway, even though he does not ask. Even though her hands shake and his eyes, dark and penetrating, track her movements with an intensity that makes her skin prickle. Thank you, he says. His voice is surprisingly gentle. You have had a long shift. It is almost over, Cassandra says. He looks at her more carefully then. She can feel it. His gaze traveling from her face to her throat, where the bruises have darkened overnight into something that looks like a map of someone else's anger. His jaw tightens. Something shifts in his expression. Something cold. Before he can speak, the back door of the diner opens. Cold night air rushes in. 2 large men in suits appear, carrying someone between them. A younger man. Maybe 22. Maybe younger. His face is bleeding. His arm hangs at an angle that suggests it is broken. Outside, one of the men says, dragging the young man toward the alley. Boss does not want a mess in the diner. Cassandra recognizes the young man. His name is Thomas. He worked as a dishwasher in the Checkered Cup's kitchen. He is kind. He gives her extra portions of leftover food when Douglas is not looking. He has a mother in the hospital waiting for kidney dialysis that costs $30,000. He cannot fight back. He does not have the strength. He has the build of someone who has never been taught how to use his body as a weapon. But Cassandra Rivera has spent 28 years learning that some things matter more than survival. Some things matter more than the rent. Some things matter more than Douglas Hale's threats or his hands around her throat or the bruises that paint her skin like a landscape of consequences. She walks out of the diner without thinking. She walks into the alley where the neon light does not reach. Where the darkness is so complete it feels like drowning in ink. "Stop," she says. The two men turn. They are large. They are holding the young man between them like a sack of broken things. "Go back inside," the larger one says. His name is Pietro. His voice sounds like gravel mixed with violence. "I will not," Cassandra says. And her voice, trembling, quiet, barely a sound, steadies into something else. Something unbreakable. She steps between the violence and the boy who cannot fight back. From the shadows at the edge of the alley, Dante Valenti watches. He has come to the Checkered Cup because intelligence suggests that Douglas Hale works for Margaret Harrington, who has been skimming protection money from his operation for 7 years. He has come to collect what is owed. But he is watching a woman, broken, small, swollen with bruises, place herself between his men and a boy like she is a shield made of nothing but will and absolute refusal to accept that some lives matter less than others. Marco appears at his shoulder. "Boss? Your order?" "Stay," Dante says. His voice is barely a whisper. "Just stay and watch." He watches as Pietro and Marco pause. He watches as Cassandra's hands curl into fists. He watches as a woman who looks like she has been beaten by life itself decides, in the darkness of a Chicago alley at 3 in the morning, that she will not let anyone else be beaten while she still has breath. And something shifts in Dante Valenti. Something connected to an empty nursery in his penthouse. A crib he never dismantled. A son he lost before the boy ever drew breath, before the child ever had a chance to become real. This broken woman with her swollen eye is about to change everything. She does not know it yet. But the universe has already made the decision. The die is cast. The story that began in darkness is about to demand light. The black and white checkered floor tiles cracked beneath her feet, stained with coffee rings and the slow decay of 1,000 overnight shifts, and Cassandra Rivera counted the bills with trembling fingers while the neon open sign flickered red through windows so fogged with August humidity that the outside world had dissolved into nothing but heat and darkness and the sound of her own breathing. $42. That was the tips. $42 in wrinkled bills and coins sticky with syrup, and she arranged them in a small pile on the counter at the Checkered Cup diner, each bill a small mercy, each coin a prayer that she could stretch it through another week. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a sound like the earth groaning, and the smell of grease and old coffee hung in the air so thick she could taste copper on her tongue. Her uniform was soaked through with sweat. The cotton fabric clung to her ribs and her lower back, transparent in places, and her orthopedic shoes, white ones, now a sickly gray, had worn so thin that her feet bled through her socks. She could feel the blister forming on her left heel with each heartbeat, a small persistent pain that had become familiar as breathing. In the kitchen doorway, Douglas Hale watched her. He was 53 years old but carried himself like a man who had never felt the weight of consequence, his graying hair slicked back with something that smelled like cheap cologne and cigarette smoke, his face ruddy from years of skimming alcohol and rage. His shirt strained against his stomach, and his eyes moved across her the way a shark circles prey. "Those tips go in the register, Cassie." His voice was sandpaper and gravel. "House policy." Cassandra's fingers curved around the bills, protective, the way a mother's hand curves around a child's face. She had worked the night shift from 9 in the evening until 3 in the morning, 6 hours of refilling coffee, of dodging hands that reached too far, of smiling at men whose eyes held no mercy. These $42 were hers. They had to be. "You told me I could keep tips on night shift," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, the kind of whisper that people had to lean close to hear, which was exactly the problem. He leaned close. His breath was hot on her face, thick with whiskey and cigarettes, and she could see the broken capillaries in his nose, the way his upper lip curled as he spoke. "Policies change, Cassie. They change whenever I say they change. You want to keep this job?" She needed this job like she needed oxygen. $78 was all she had left in the world, the tips, plus what remained in her checking account after the electric bill had been paid. $78 stretched across an unknown number of days was a mathematics problem she had been solving her entire life, and she was running out of solutions. She handed over $20. She watched his thick fingers close around the bills, watched him pocket the money, and something inside her chest crumpled like paper burning. But she said nothing. She picked up the coffee pot and turned back toward the dining room because speaking cost energy she could not afford to spend. In the corner booth, a man in an expensive black suit sat alone. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so precisely that it moved like liquid silk when he shifted his position, and his white shirt was open at the collar, revealing the faint outline of a gold chain that caught the fluorescent light. His dark hair was swept back from a face that held no softness, high sharp cheekbones, a jaw like something carved from stone, a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone like a blade had once tried to cut him in half and nearly succeeded. Dante Valenti. She did not know his name. She did not know that two bodyguards flanked the diner's entrance, Marco with a scar across his jaw and the shoulders of a linebacker, Pietro with hands the size of dinner plates and eyes that had watched men die without blinking. She did not know that this man had come to the Checkered Cup because intelligence suggested that Douglas Hale worked for Margaret Harrington, that Harrington owned the Belmont hotel chain and had been skimming protection money for 5 months, that $300,000 had vanished from Dante Valenti's operation like smoke. She only knew that his dark eyes tracked every movement in the diner with the precision of a hunter, that he had not touched the food in front of him, that when their eyes had met for a fraction of a second as she refilled his coffee, something in those eyes had felt like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark. At 3:42 in the morning, the kitchen door slammed open. The sound cracked through the diner like a gunshot, and Marco and Pietro dragged a figure between them, Tommy Reese, 17 years old, a dishwasher who had worked at the Checkered Cup for 8 months and spent most of his time trying to be invisible. He was thin, angular, with a kind of face that held too much fear, and he was crying, his body slack between the two large men. "You were told to keep your mouth shut about what you see here," Marco said. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of quiet that meant violence was already decided. "You understand me?" Tommy nodded, sobbing, and they began dragging him toward the back alley. Cassandra's hand shook. The coffee pot trembled in her grip, and for a moment the entire world narrowed to a single point of pure terror. Every instinct screamed at her to stay still, to be invisible, to let the machinery of violence grind forward without her interference. She was no one. She was nothing. She had $78 and a job that barely kept her alive, and whatever was happening in this diner was not her problem to solve. But she saw herself in that kid. She saw the same fear, the same sense of drowning, the same desperate wish to be anywhere else, to be anyone else. She set down the coffee pot on the counter with a soft clink and walked toward the back door. The humid night air hit her like a fist. August in Chicago hung over everything like a curse, thick and wet and impossible to breathe, and the sound of distant thunder rumbled beneath the industrial hum of the city. The alley behind the diner was dark except for the weak glow of a single bulb above the back door, and it cast everything in a sickly yellow light that made the dumpster look like a monument to garbage and despair. Marco slammed Tommy against the dumpster. The sound of the boy's spine hitting metal echoed through the alley, and he cried out, a small broken sound that made something in Cassandra's chest tear open. "Let him go," she said. The words came out small, barely a sound above the hum of the city, but both men turned toward her. In the shadows at the edge of the alley, she felt rather than saw movement, a third figure, watching, waiting. Pietro laughed. It was a sound like gravel being crushed beneath a tire. "Lady, you need to walk away. You need to walk away right now." She did not move. She stepped forward instead, her small frame positioning itself between the violence and the boy, and her hands curled into fists even though her hands had no power, no capacity for violence, no weapon except the absolute refusal in her posture that some lives mattered less than others. "He is just a kid," she said. "Whatever he did, I will pay for it. Take it from my wages. Take all of it. Just let him go." Marco's hand moved toward his jacket. From the shadows, a voice emerged quiet as death itself. "Enough." The two men stepped back instantly, the way water steps back from a stone thrown into its surface. And Dante Valenti came forward, moving through the darkness with the deliberate grace of a predator, and his eyes found Cassandra's face and held there for a long moment that seemed to contain entire lifetimes. She was a woman of 28 years old but looked as though she had lived decades longer. Her black eye was a landscape of purple and yellow, the bruises already beginning to fade into the sickly green of older injuries. Fingerprint marks ran along her throat, 5 fingers on each side, visible as dark shadows against her skin. Her knuckles were bleeding where she had gripped the coffee pot too hard, small cuts that wet blood. "What is your name?" His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "Cassandra Rivera." "You know who I am?" "No, sir." He saw the lie in her eyes, but he also saw something else, a defiance, a refusal, something unbreakable in a body that should have been broken. And something shifted in his chest, something connected to an empty penthouse on the 42nd floor of a building that overlooked Chicago, to a nursery that he had assembled with his own hands for years ago, to a crib that still stood in the corner of that room untouched because the son who should have slept there had never drawn breath. "Go back inside, Cassandra Rivera," he said. "You have made your point." She did not move until Tommy ran. The boy scrambled past her, past Marco and Pietro, disappearing into the humid darkness of the Chicago night. Only then did she turn back toward the diner, her legs moving on their own, her mind elsewhere, her hand still shaking. When the back door closed behind her, Marco and Enzo exchanged a look that neither had seen in 15 years of working for Dante Valenti. Something had changed in that alley, something they could not name but could feel in the air like electricity before a storm. Dante stood alone in the darkness, the humid air pressing against his expensive suit, and he thought about the crib that waited upstairs in his penthouse, and about a woman with bleeding knuckles and absolute refusal in her eyes. And he understood that by defending that dishwasher, Cassandra Rivera had just painted a target on her back that would bring Margaret Harrington's entire operation crashing down. The penthouse smells of leather, expensive cologne, and sickness. Cassandra enters the living room where Noah lies motionless on a leather couch, his small chest rising and falling too fast. Dante Valenti stands by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Chicago, his back rigid, phone pressed to his ear. His tailored black suit costs more than everything she owned. The city sprawls beneath them, indifferent to the crisis unfolding 34 stories above the streets. "Where is the doctor?" "I called 40 minutes ago." His voice carries an edge that could cut steel. Pietro and Marco hover near the doorway, useless, their expensive shoes clicking softly against marble as they shift their weight. Cassandra approaches the couch. She touches Noah's forehead, burning hot, fever climbing past 104 degrees. The boy's skin is flushed red, his breathing shallow and rapid like a wounded animal struggling for air. "How long has he been like this?" she asks. Dante turns. His dark eyes meet hers with an intensity that steals breath, like a blade wrapped in ice. In 15 years, Marco had never seen him look at anyone like that. "Since this afternoon. The doctor said it was just a cold." "This is not just a cold." She studies Noah's lips, slightly blue at the edges, the dangerous pale beneath his fever flush. "Call an ambulance. Now." Dante dials. His hands move with the precision of a man used to command, but his face has changed. Something ancient and terrified moves behind his eyes. Noah's breathing stutters. Then stops completely. His small body goes rigid, then limp like a puppet with its strings cut. Dante freezes mid-sentence, the phone falling from his hand. It hits the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot in the silence. The most powerful man in Chicago collapses to his knees beside the couch, his hands hovering over Noah's chest but unable to move, unable to think. His world ends in the space of a single stopped breath. Marco and Pietro stand frozen against the wall, their eyes wide, their mouths open in shock. They have watched Dante order executions without flinching. They have seen him negotiate million-dollar operations with ice in his veins. They have never seen him afraid. The private doctor on speakerphone stammers that the ambulance is 12 minutes away. 12 minutes. 12 minutes too late. Cassandra Rivera, with her swollen eye, her bruised throat, her body held together by willpower and orthopedic shoes, pushes past all of them. She has not forgotten how. The training lives in her hands even after 3 years of serving coffee instead of saving lives. She tilts Noah's head back, locks her fingers together, positions her hands on his small chest. 30 compressions. Hard and fast. 2 rescue breaths. 30 compressions. 2 rescue breaths. Her bleeding knuckles leave smears on Noah's hospital gown, but she does not stop. 1, 2, 3. The rhythm is a prayer she stopped saying years ago, now spoken through her hands. Dante watches her, tears streaming down his face, completely helpless. He who controls 17 city blocks, who owns the loyalty of 40 men, who has built an empire from blood and strategy, stands useless while a woman with a bruised throat keeps his nephew alive. After 90 seconds that stretch into eternity, Noah gasps. Coughs. His eyes flutter open like a bird returning to consciousness. Cassandra keeps her hands on his chest until his breathing steadies, until color returns to his lips, until the paramedics burst through the door 8 minutes later. Their uniforms are blue and white. Their movements are trained and efficient. They take over with practiced hands. Vitals stabilizing. Oxygen levels rising. The fever is breaking. Only then does Cassandra step back. Her legs shake so hard she nearly falls. Dante catches her elbow, steadies her with a grip that trembles, and in that moment something passes between them, recognition, gratitude, something deeper that neither can name. His hand on her arm is the first time he has touched another person with gentleness in 4 years. The paramedics take Noah to the hospital. Dante rides with them, leaving Cassandra alone in the penthouse with Marco and Pietro watching her like she has just performed a miracle. Which she has. 3 hours later. The clock on the penthouse wall reads 6:13 a.m. Cassandra sits in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around coffee she cannot drink, her mind replaying Noah's blue lips, his still chest, the moment when her hands understood what her mind had already known, that sometimes the difference between life and death is 60 seconds and a person who refuses to calculate the cost of saving a life. At 6:24 a.m., Dante returns. Noah is stable. Admitted for observation. Fever breaking. The crisis has transformed into recovery. Dante enters the kitchen and stops when he sees her. This woman who saved his nephew's life, still wearing her stained diner uniform, still wearing the bruises like a map of her suffering. He sits across from her. For the first time, she sees exhaustion in his face, the weight he carries like stones in his chest. You did not have to do that. You could have let the professionals handle it. There were no professionals. Just scared men. He almost smiles. Almost. The muscle memory of joy is still there, dormant but present. You know CPR. I was a nurse's aide before. Before things changed. Her voice is barely a whisper, like a candle in the wind. What changed? She touches the bruises on her throat unconsciously. They have darkened to black in the past 2 days. They will be there for weeks. My husband Miguel died 3 years ago. Factory accident. No insurance. No settlement. I lost everything trying to pay for his funeral. Lost my nursing certification when I could not afford the renewal fees. Now I serve coffee to men who do not see me. Dante leans forward, his eyes never leaving hers. His voice drops like a confession in a church. I see you, Cassandra Rivera. She looks away, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze, the weight of being truly seen by someone with power. Why am I here? Really? Because I need someone I can trust around Noah. Someone who acts instead of freezes. Someone who does not calculate the value of a life before deciding to save it. You do not know me. I know you stood between my men and a dishwasher you had never met. I know you have $78 to your name and you still tried to pay for his mistake with money you do not have. I know you saved Noah when everyone else, including me, was useless. He stands, walks to a desk across the kitchen, returns with an envelope. Places it in front of her without ceremony. She opens it. $10,000 in cash. American bills. Real. Her breath stops in her chest. I cannot take this. You already earned it. Noah is alive because of you. This is not charity. This is payment. This is too much. It is not enough. He sits again, his voice gentler than she thought possible from a man like him. Stay for 1 week. Help the staff care for Noah when he comes home tomorrow. I will pay you $500 per day. After that, you decide if you want to stay or go. No pressure. No obligation. She stares at the money. 3 months of rent. Medicine. Food. The electric bill. The possibility of not eviction. Why would you help me? I am nobody. For the first time, his composure breaks like thin ice. His voice drops to almost a whisper, and she understands that he is about to give her something more precious than money. 4 years ago, my wife was pregnant. We had the nursery ready. I painted it myself, pale blue walls, stars on the ceiling. We named him before he was born. Alessandro. He stops, his jaw tight, his hands gripped together on the table. He was stillborn. Cord wrapped around his neck. The doctors said there was nothing anyone could do. My wife did not survive the grief. She left me 6 months later. Cassandra's eyes fill with tears. I still have that nursery upstairs. I cannot bring myself to change it. Every morning I walk past that closed door and feel like a man carrying his own coffin. He looks at her directly now. You gave Noah back to me when I had already lost him in my mind. You do not get to call yourself nobody after that. Meanwhile, across the city at the Checkered Cup diner, Douglas Hale locks the office door with shaking hands. The diner is dark except for the neon glow seeping through the windows. He dials a number with fingers that tremble. A woman's voice answers. Cold. Sharp. Like ice breaking under weight. This better be important, Douglas. Miss Harrington, we have a problem. That waitress, Cassandra, she spent the night at Dante Valenti's penthouse. Silence stretches like pulled taffy. Then a low laugh that sounds like winter. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. Does she know who he is? I do not think so. She is just a broke waitress trying to survive. Nobody is just anything, Douglas. If Valenti has taken an interest in her, she is either a threat or an opportunity. Watch her. Report everything. And Douglas? If you mess this up, I will make sure the only job you get is cleaning toilets in county jail for the rest of your natural life. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Miss Harrington. The call ends. The line goes dead. Douglas Hale stares at Cassandra's last paycheck on his desk, $42 he never processed, tips he pocketed. He rips it into pieces. They flutter to the floor like snow. If Dante Valenti wants her, Hale will make sure she remembers who really controls her life. That afternoon, Noah comes home from the hospital. His fever is gone but energy depleted, his small body moving slowly, carefully, like a bird learning to fly again. Cassandra helps him settle into his bedroom. The walls are covered in superhero posters. Toys scatter across plush carpet that costs more than her monthly rent. She smooths his blanket. His sheets smell like laundry detergent and safety. Noah looks up at her with Dante's dark eyes. Uncle Dante said you saved my life. You saved your own life by being strong. Were you scared? Terrified? But you did it anyway. She touches his small hand. His fingers are thin like bird bones. Being brave does not mean you are not scared. It means you are scared and you do it anyway. Noah studies her face. The bruises she tried to cover with makeup that ran in the humidity of the penthouse bathroom. Who hurt you? Her breath catches. Children ask the questions adults avoid. Someone who does not matter anymore. Uncle Dante says people who hurt others are cowards. He says real strength is protecting people who cannot protect themselves. Tears burn behind her eyes. From the doorway, Dante watches them. His chest is tight with an emotion he buried for years ago. Hope. The most dangerous feeling of all. Marco appears behind him, whispers in his ear. Something about federal investigators. Something about Margaret Harrington. Dante's expression hardens like stone. He steps into the room. Noah, rest. Cassandra, may I speak with you? In his office, surrounded by dark wood and leather that smells like old money, Dante hands her a folder. Her hands shake as she opens it. Inside are surveillance photos. Douglas Hale meeting with Margaret Harrington outside the Belmont Hotel. Envelopes of cash changing hands. Timestamps dated across 5 months. Your manager works for her. Margaret Harrington owns 12 hotels in Chicago and has been skimming $300,000 from my operation over the last 5 months. She uses the diner to launder money. Cassandra's hands shake. I did not know. I swear I did not know. I know you did not. But Hale knows you are here. Which means Margaret knows. Which means you are in danger. She stands. Her voice breaks like glass. Then I should leave. I should not have come here. I bring nothing but problems. Dante moves around the desk. Close enough that she can feel his presence like heat from a fire. You brought Noah back from the dead. You brought light into a home that has been dark for 4 years. You do not get to leave. Why do you care what happens to me? His hand touches her cheek. Gentle. Avoiding the bruises. Because when I watched you save Noah, I saw what I used to be before grief turned me into stone. You reminded me that some things are worth protecting. Her phone buzzes. A text from Douglas Hale. Heard you got a new job. Shame if something happened to it. We need to talk. She shows him the screen. His jaw tightens. Something cold and dangerous stirs in his chest. He will not touch you again. Outside, the Chicago wind howls against the penthouse windows like something with teeth. 3 days later, at exactly 6:11 in the morning, Cassandra's phone rings. The sound cuts through the penthouse quiet like a blade through silk. She is in the kitchen preparing Noah's breakfast, scrambled eggs cooling on a plate, when Douglas Hale's voice crawls through the speaker. Poison dripping slow. Checkered Cup. Noon. Alone. Or I tell everyone you have been spying for Valenti, and Margaret makes you disappear. The line goes dead. Cassandra stands motionless, the phone still pressed to her ear, eggs growing cold on the counter. Noah appears in the kitchen doorway, his small frame wrapped in pajamas that are too big for his 5-year-old body. His eyes search her face the way children do, reading fear like a map written in blood. Vivi? You look sad. She sets the phone down with trembling fingers. Forces a smile that cracks like old glass. I am not sad, Noah. Come eat breakfast. But they both know she is lying. At 11:30, she stands in front of the penthouse mirror, wearing the same worn uniform from the Checkered Cup, the fabric thin enough to see through in certain light. Her reflection shows a woman who has aged a decade in the last 3 days. Bruises on her neck still purple at the edges. Hair pulled back so tight it hurts her scalp. This is how Douglas Hale knows her. This is what he expects to see. Dante finds her there, his silhouette filling the doorway like a storm cloud. 6'1", muscular shoulders stretching the fabric of his tailored charcoal suit, his dark eyes taking in every detail of her appearance. A scar runs from his left eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a war fought in the streets of Chicago 10 years ago. "You are not going alone," he says. His voice is not a question. He said alone. "If you follow him." "I am not following him." Dante steps closer, his gold watch catching the morning light. Marco and Pietro will be in the kitchen. In the alley. In the supply closet. Everywhere. You will be watched every second. If he puts a hand on you, if he raises his voice, if he even looks at you wrong, they will move in before you finish your sentence. She turns to face him. He has those fake photos. Those doctored bank statements. He is going to show me what he is threatening to release. Let him. Dante's hand touches her face, careful around the bruises. His touch is warm, solid, like the only real thing in a world falling apart. We have already given the FBI everything they need. Hale, Margaret, all of it. They are moving today. At noon, while you are meeting with him, federal agents will be raiding Margaret's office and Hale's apartment. All you have to do is survive the next hour. And then? And then you are free. The rain starts as she drives toward the diner, fat droplets hitting the windshield with the sound of 1,000 tiny hammers. The Chicago streets blur past. The Checkered Cup looms ahead, its neon sign flickering even in daylight, the black and white checkered awning sagging from water damage. She has spent 3 years of her life in that building, serving coffee that tasted like metal and smiling at men who looked through her like she was glass. Douglas Hale sits in a back booth. His hair is slicked back with too much product. His shirt is tucked in too tight, showing the soft belly of a man who eats well while his employees count tips at closing. He smiles when she sits across from him, and that smile contains every threat he has ever made, every time he touched her without permission, every wage he stole. "Cassandra. You look frightened." "That is adorable." He slides a manila envelope across the table. Inside are photographs. Bank statements. Wire transfers. All documenting your affair with Dante Valenti and your cooperation with federal agents investigating Margaret Harrington's business practices. She opens the envelope. Inside are photos of her entering Dante's building. Security footage doctored to show her leaving with other men. Bank statements bearing her name but showing deposits she never received. Her stomach turns. "These are fake," she says. "Of course they are fake. But by the time you prove that, you are already dead. Dante's enemies will have seen them. They will assume you are a spy planted in his organization. Margaret Harrington will make sure that the media runs these photographs every hour for a week. Your face will be synonymous with betrayal. The great Dante Valenti, brought down by a waitress and a hotel magnate." Douglas leans forward. "Will you help us?" "Help you how?" "You give us Valenti's schedule. Where he goes. Who he meets with. You plant a listening device in his office. A small thing. Easy. Invisible." The rain hammers against the diner windows. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like dying insects. She thinks of Noah's small hand in hers, his absolute trust that she will keep him safe. She thinks of Dante's broken voice in that dark nursery, his words about Alessandro, about the son he lost before the boy ever drew breath. She thinks of the way Dante looked at her when she saved his nephew's life, like she had given him something he thought was gone forever. "No," she says. Douglas's face darkens. He stands, moves around the booth, grabs her wrist and twists until lightning shoots up her arm. His breath smells like coffee and something rotten underneath. "You do not get to say no. You are nobody. A waitress. Nothing. You are worth less than the floor you stand on. You do what I tell you or Margaret buries you so deep no one will ever find your body." From the diner entrance, a voice cuts through the rain sound like thunder. "Let her go." Dante Valenti stands framed in the doorway, water dripping from his cashmere coat, his dark eyes burning with something cold and ancient and without mercy. Marco and Pietro flank him, their hands visible, their bodies coiled like weapons waiting for release. Behind them, the rain falls in sheets, turning the street into a river. Douglas releases Cassandra, steps backward, his face draining of all color. His hand moves toward his jacket. Dante moves forward. Each step measured. Each step a promise. You made a mistake putting your hands on her. Douglas pulls a gun from his jacket, aims it directly at Cassandra's chest. His hand shakes, the barrel wavering between her heart and her throat. Stay back or I shoot her. Cassandra does not flinch. She locks eyes with Dante across the checkered floor that has been the landscape of her misery for 3 years. She mouths 3 words, I am sorry. But Dante is already moving. Faster than should be possible. Marco disarms Douglas with brutal efficiency, the gun clattering across the checkered tiles and sliding under a booth. Pietro forces Douglas to his knees, wrenches his arm behind his back until Douglas screams. Dante crouches in front of him, voice soft as silk and sharp as broken glass. You work for Margaret Harrington. You steal from your employees. You put your hands on women who cannot fight back. Today that ends. Douglas trembles, words spilling like water from a broken dam. It was not my idea. Margaret made me do it. She said if I did not cooperate, she would tell the IRS about my offshore accounts. Please, I will testify. I will give you everything. Dante stands. You will. But not because I am offering you mercy. Because the FBI is already outside. The diner door opens. Federal agents in tactical gear flood in like a tide, led by Agent Sarah Chen, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray eyes and a jaw set like a vice. She holds up a warrant the size of a newspaper. Douglas Hale, you are under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, extortion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Marco hauls Douglas to his feet, hands him to the agents. Douglas collapses, trembling like a cornered animal, begging for mercy that will not come. No, please, you do not understand, she made me. His voice disappears into the rain. At that same hour, 3 blocks away at the Belmont Hotel, Margaret Harrington's office door crashes open. 8 federal agents swarm in, weapons drawn like dark flowers blooming in the sunlight streaming through her floor-to-ceiling windows. Margaret sits at her desk reviewing contracts, her perfectly manicured hands freezing mid-page. Agent Chen appears, holds up a warrant thick as a book. Margaret Harrington, you are under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, tax evasion, extortion, and conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to remain silent. Margaret stands slowly, her face a mask of composure even as her hands betray her with a tremor. She is 63 years old, her gray hair arranged in a style that costs $400 every 6 weeks, her diamond earrings worth more than most people's cars. The kind of woman who has never been told no, never faced consequences, never imagined that power could be taken from her. This is a mistake. I have lawyers. Expensive ones. Your lawyers are currently being served their own warrants for aiding and abetting. Agent Chen's voice does not rise, does not need to. You skimmed $300,000 from Dante Valenti's protection payments over 5 months, laundered it through 12 businesses including the Checkered Cup diner, and used it to finance illegal real estate acquisitions. We have 8 months of financial records, wire recordings, and testimony from 14 witnesses including your assistant, your accountant, and Douglas Hale, who is currently cooperating. Margaret's composure shatters like dropped crystal. Hale? That spineless coward. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. The handcuffs click into place with a sound like a coffin closing. Agents lead her through the hotel lobby as cameras flash, reporters shouting questions, her empire crumbling in real time. She is walked past her own employees, past business partners who turn away, past the life she built on lies and stolen money. Outside, news vans line the street like vultures. Margaret Harrington, hotel mogul and philanthropist, is led to a federal vehicle in handcuffs. Her face fills every screen in Chicago. The reporter's voice cuts through the rain. Margaret Harrington faces 40 years in federal prison for racketeering and money laundering in what prosecutors are calling the largest protection money skimming operation in Chicago history. 40 years. For decades of watching someone else run her empire from a cell 6 feet by 8 feet. This is not death. Death would be too quick, too merciful. This is systematic destruction. This is justice. That night, Cassandra sits on the penthouse balcony, Chicago lights sprawling below her like a constellation someone knocked over. The humid August air has finally broken, and rain falls in sheets, soaking through her clothes, plastering her hair to her face. She does not move. From her purse, she pulls a photograph. Miguel, her husband, frozen in time with his smile full of a future they never got. His eyes bright with promises that death made impossible. She has carried this photo for 5 years, kept it against her heart through every shift at the diner, every moment of counting tips with trembling fingers, every night she thought about joining him in whatever comes after. The rain blurs his face. She thinks about Douglas Hale's gun pointed at her chest, about Margaret Harrington's cold threats, about how close she came to disappearing like she never mattered. She thinks about Dante's world of violence and power, of enemies who kill without hesitation, of the weight of ruling a kingdom built on fear. She thinks about Noah's small hand in hers, the absolute trust of a 5-year-old who believes she will protect him. That trust terrifies her. She should leave. She should run before she gets Noah hurt, before Dante is killed protecting her, before she loses someone else she. The thought stops cold. Before she loves him. Too late for that. Thunder rolls across the sky, a sound like the world breaking open. She closes her eyes, ready to make the decision that will save everyone but destroy her. Ready to write the goodbye letter, to slip away at dawn, to disappear before she becomes the reason anyone dies. Then a warm jacket settles around her shoulders. Dante sits beside her, close enough that his arm brushes hers, far enough to give her space. The rain pounds down, streaming off his cashmere coat, soaking into his hair. He does not ask her what is wrong. He does not offer false comfort or desperate promises. He just sits with her in the rain, two broken people watching the storm, and something in her chest that was ready to shatter holds together a little longer. The bus pulled away from the station, diesel exhaust mixing with wet pavement, and Cassandra watched the windows blur as other passengers settled into their seats. She had not eaten. She had not slept since writing the letter at 4 a.m., her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. The $78 she came to Chicago with remained in her pocket. She would not take Dante's money, would not take anything that might tether her to him, to Noah, to the life she was running from because loving them was the same as destroying them. The photo of Miguel pressed against her ribs, held in the inner pocket of her jacket against her heart. 5 years she had carried it. 5 years since his death on a construction site, since the hospital call to tell her his spine had been crushed, since she spent 48 hours at his bedside watching him slip away while medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter like accusations. She had survived that grief by becoming small, invisible, countable only in the tips she earned, $17 on a Tuesday, $23 on a Friday, enough to eat. But then Dante looked at her like she mattered. She closed her eyes as the bus merged onto the highway. Through the window behind her, she could see the Chicago skyline fading, the buildings growing smaller, her last chance to change her mind disappearing in the distance. It was the right choice. It was the only choice. If Douglas Hale would point a gun at her for knowing Dante, if Margaret Harrington would threaten to erase her from existence for mattering to him, then staying meant. A hand gripped her shoulder. She opened her eyes. Dante Valenti stood in the aisle, rain soaking into his hair and shoulders, his breathing heavy like he had run. The bus driver had stopped and turned to stare. Other passengers craned their necks. Marco stood at the front with money in his hand, already paying the driver, already clearing the way. Cassandra's heart stopped. "Get off the bus," Dante said, his voice steady, firm, like a command that had never been refused. "Now." She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "No. You need to leave. You cannot be here. If anyone sees you." I do not care who sees me. He pulled her up by her arms, gentle despite the command in his voice. I read your letter. Every word. And every word was wrong. The other passengers watched in stunned silence as Dante led her toward the front of the bus. She grabbed her duffel bag, her hands trembling, her mind fracturing between the need to protect him and the desperate desire to stay. The cold air hit her as they descended the steps. Marco waited at the car door, his scarred face expressionless, but something flickered in his eyes, surprise, recognition, the shock of seeing his boss act this way. I told you not to follow me, Cassandra said as Dante pushed her gently into the back seat, sliding in beside her. I told you. You told me a lot of things. He held up the letter, still damp from his pocket. You told me you are nobody. That you do not belong in my world. That you will get me killed. He folded the letter carefully, placed it on the seat between them. You told me everything except the truth. The truth is I love you and that is why I have to leave. The words came out as a whisper, fragmented as broken glass. The truth is I watched Douglas Hale point a gun at my chest because I got close to you. The truth is Margaret Harrington threatened to make me disappear. I cannot be the reason you lose Noah. I cannot be. The reason I remember what it feels like to be alive. Dante's voice cut through her panic, sharp and precise. You already are. The moment you stood between Marco and that dishwasher, the moment you saved Noah when I was useless on my knees, you became the only reason I have to stay in this world. She shook her head violently. You had Alessandro. You had your wife. You have your empire that is built on blood and fear, and you think I want Noah to grow up in that world. His hand found hers in the darkness of the car. I have spent for years maintaining a nursery that should have been a child's bedroom. For years looking at a crib that will never have a baby in it again. For years existing, not living. And then you walked into my diner at 3 in the morning, counted your tips with trembling fingers, stood between violence and a stranger, and reminded me what it means to be human. The car pulled away from the bus station. Through the rear window, Cassandra watched the Greyhound sign disappear into the distance, her escape route, her chance to vanish, her final opportunity to protect him. If I stay, she said, each word costing her something she did not have to give, if I stay and something happens to you, if I am the reason your enemies find a weakness, I will not survive it. I survived Miguel's death by becoming empty. I cannot do that again. Dante turned to face her fully, and in the passing streetlights, she saw his eyes were wet. Dante Valenti, who ruled Chicago with a word, who never showed weakness, who controlled empires of fear and violence, had tears running down his face. Then we survive it together, he said quietly. Not because it is safe. Not because it is easy. But because the alternative is spending the rest of my life knowing I had the chance to save myself and I let you walk away. She kissed him before she could think, before she could rationalize, before her fear could rebuild the walls she had spent 5 years constructing. His hand came up to her face, gentle, reverent, like she was something infinitely precious. Rain dripped from his hair onto her cheeks and she could not tell where his tears ended and the storm began. 6 months, she whispered against his lips. If we are still alive in 6 months, I will believe this might work. He pulled back slightly, his dark eye searching hers. We will be alive in 6 months. And 6 months after that. And 6 months after that. Because I will not lose you the way I lost them. Marco did not look back from the driver's seat, but his shoulders relaxed infinitesimally. In the rearview mirror, Cassandra caught the ghost of a smile on his scarred face. The car moved through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago, taking her away from the bus station, away from disappearing, toward something terrifying and uncertain and worth every ounce of fear in her chest. 6 months later, winter had settled over the city like a promise kept. The penthouse windows framed snow falling in soft patterns against the darkness. Cassandra stood on the balcony with coffee cradled in her hands, watching the city lights reflect off the white-covered buildings. She wore Dante's cashmere sweater, navy blue, expensive, worth more than a month of her old rent, and beneath it, Miguel's photo still pressed against her heart. The door opened behind her. Dante emerged with a second cup of coffee, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, sat without speaking. This was their ritual now, these quiet mornings before Noah woke, before the world demanded anything from them. "I got the job at St. Mary's," she said, not for the first time, but the word still felt like victory. "Full-time position in the pediatric ward. They want me to start in 2 weeks." He smiled against the rim of his coffee cup. "I never doubted you would. 3 months ago you told me I could get my certification renewed. I told you that was impossible. That I did not have the time or money and I told you that impossible is just another word for something no one believed you could do." He set down his cup, took her hand. "You saved my nephew's life. You brought me back from 4 years of grief. You are not impossible, Cassandra. You are the strongest person I know." She turned the photo of Miguel over in her mind, the way she did less and less now. His face was still beloved, still precious, but the weight of loss had transformed into something gentler, gratitude for the time they had, peace with the time that had passed. "I think he would approve," she said quietly. Dante squeezed her hand. "I think he would be grateful you found someone who sees you." Inside, Noah's voice called out, high and bright, "Breakfast." He had made pancakes, only burned 2 this time. They went in together, leaving the snow falling soft behind them, leaving the Chicago winter framing a life that had seemed impossible 3 months ago but was now unmistakably, undeniably real. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. If this story moved your heart, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to remember they are not alone. Subscribe so you never miss another story that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. And tell us, have you ever been that hand someone needed? Have you ever had someone reach out and change everything for you? Your story matters. Tell it in the comments below. No matter how dark it gets, remember this: after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next video. Goodbye.